You start it off. All right. No, sit down. Sit here. Go ahead, Leonard.
All right, I just want to welcome everybody here this morning and welcome you to the press conference of the AFN Assembly here today. We have a number of our leadership here at the table here this morning. We have AFN National Chief Woodhouse Nepinak, Third Manitoba Regional Chief Willie Moore. We have Quebec Regional Chief Francis Vero-Paul. We have FSIN Vice Chief Fabian Head, and we also have SCO Grand Chief Jerry Daniels, and we also have our elder here, Leonard Rieseltraveler. So I'll ask Leonard to open us in a good way and say a prayer for our press conference here this morning.
So if you're on live.
Down here. So, my name is Chair Francis. I'm in the National Chief's Office. I'm the Press Secretary. Our first speaker here will be National Chief Woodhouse Nepinak. What we'll do is we'll get her to make some comments, and then the next speaker will be Regional Chief Will Moore, and then we'll have Regional Chief Proxy Fabian Head speak as well. As soon as they're done opening their opening remarks, we'll do some Q&As. So, and when we do the Q&As, I'll just ask the reporters that you guys see your name and the outlet that you guys are reporting from. So, thank you, National Chief.
Miigwech, Chimigwech, Apichikichinendam, Akanakabijayan Manungum. Thank you so very much for being here, each and every one of you. Welcome to Treaty 1 territory. I want to thank the Treaty 1 Chiefs for welcoming us to their territory today. And I want to commend them for their hard work. And, you know, I know that they've got Capion Barracks, and I'm so impressed with Treaty 1 Nation Chiefs, because when I was a young woman working in this region, this is where I come from this territory, and I know that it was not long ago that I remember lawyers were all around the table, and I looked at, and then I, you know, going to grand openings of their gas bar and seeing how much they're progressing in this country. I'm so proud of Treaty 1 and Treaty 1 Nations. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you for hosting us. I also just want to say before I begin my remarks that I'm glad that we're back here in Manitoba. A couple of years ago, we had voted down to come here because of what we had went through. And you know, even though I live in Ottawa, I live here as well. This is my home. And being a First Nations woman in this territory, seeing billboards of our voiceless women in landfills having to become the focal point of an election was really difficult to watch and to see. And at that point, I know regional chiefs, we were to come here back then, and regional chiefs, the executive pushed back and said we weren't going to come to Manitoba because of that. So I know that things have changed and shifted, and I want to say to every Manitoban, thank you. Thank you for standing with us. Thank you for standing with women, especially. It doesn't matter what color you are, but that we stand up and fight for justice and closure for families. So I just wanted to say that truthfully and thankfully, that we lift up Manitobans for helping us with that issue, very sensitive issue. And also, of course, lift up, our Premier, and, hope that never happens again for anybody, anywhere. I just want to say that I thank you, Elder Leonard Weasel Traveler, who's, been such a guiding force and a father figure to me. I want to thank him for his opening us up in a good way. The chiefs that are here with us, thank you so very much. We want to, of course, welcome all of our guests, welcome all of you. Thank you for being here as well, to members of the media. I see one of our Grand Chiefs in the back. He should be sitting up here with us. And I want to just thank you all for attending this news conference and to give you a preview of our upcoming annual AFN Assembly this week. We are excited to host our annual summer gathering that was supposed to be in July, but of course we know there's forest fires and so I just want to say that we're glad that we're gathering here on Treaty 1 territory here in Winnipeg. And I've attended national assemblies. I was 4 years old when I attended my first assembly with my chief and my council. I don't know why I got to go along, but my parents took me along, and we had another chief at that time. His name was late Chief Ed Anderson, and I remember my chief taking me at 4 years old to my first assembly, and I remember him today, and I thank him for that. And I just think that our assemblies always have to make sure that we include children, and of course our elders. We talked about them this week, that they get complimentary access to these spaces to hear the chiefs discuss, debate, and move forward on issues. And and I think of that today, and I thank them for that. I thank my elders back then for bringing me along all the time and for helping to raise me in a good way. We have a busy agenda, of course, with many guests. We look forward to welcoming Premier Wabetconnequet, Wab Kinew, the Federal Minister Rebecca Alty, former Governor General Michel Jean, and members of Parliament from all main political parties. We have sessions planned on a diverse range of issues, including child welfare reform, repatriation of artifacts from around the world, policing, the toxic drug crisis, and closing the First Nations infrastructure gap. In March, we opened the claims portal. 5 months later, we have received, we will also present an update on the rollout of the $23 billion federal settlement that we had negotiated. And I want to thank everybody here for helping us just a couple of years ago. It was tough to negotiate that, but we got through together. And, we will be talking about that in 2023 on discrimination on First Nations Child and Family Services Endurance Principle. In March of this year, of course, we opened that claims portal. And 5 months later, now we have received 4,000 applications, and the first payments are starting to roll out as of last week. This week's assembly is also significant because it's the first time that chiefs will formally gather to discuss resolutions on the Building Canada Act since it was rushed through Parliament in June. We look forward to debating and discussions on policy resolutions brought forward by chiefs at a critical point in our nation-to-nation relationship. The way the act was introduced has caused concern for many chiefs. This assembly is an opportunity for chiefs to deliberate and to provide direction to each other and, of course, to the Assembly of First Nations. Important decisions will be made by Cabinet under the legislation. Those decisions must respect our treaty and inherent rights and our rights in our title. In the coming days and weeks, we will be focusing a lot of attention on October's upcoming federal budget. Federal budget making must advance reconciliation and Canada's international obligations to respect our rights to self-determination. This October's budget will also be the government's first chance to commit to close the infrastructure gap and address some of the mistrust created by Bill C-5. It's an opportunity to advance implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the principles and the calls to action on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the National Inquiry into the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Media were excluded from the discussions in July at the Federal Summit. The Chiefs and Federal Summit in attendance know that behind closed doors, the budget was discussed with Prime Minister Carney. When asked about reports of federal cuts to First Nations budgets, the Prime Minister reassured Chiefs at that time that he understood more needs to be done and not less. The truth is that the persistent gap in socioeconomic outcomes between First Nations and the rest of this country coincided with the 2% budget cap that was imposed for decades. That was harsh on our people. And thankfully, new investments by the previous Liberal government have started to make a difference. The most recent Wellbeing Index for First Nations report concluded that the gap narrowed between 2016 and then again in 2021. This progress represents the largest gap closure between First Nations and the rest of Canada in the past 4 decades. And there's no time to go back and to undo that progress. The Prime Minister says that this was absolutely clear, I quote him, on social services, policing, health, education, and the infrastructure gap. The Assembly of First Nations presented our pre-budget submission to Canada a few weeks ago. And we will share a summary this week, but I am happy to report and to talk about a few key elements with you today before I conclude and invite the Chiefs to talk and say a few words. In addition to resolution from Chiefs, the Assembly of First Nations budget report reflects that the new government's emphasis on capital investment, essential services gaps, and building capacity for growth. Accordingly, we have included a significant emphasis on infrastructure. First Nations infrastructure priorities are matters of national interest and priority. These needs cannot be addressed by only trickle-down economics. Specifically, we have also called in our pre-budget submission for strategic capital investments over 10 years to close Canada's $360 billion First Nations infrastructure gap. And in addition to significant socioeconomics benefits to First Nations, this investment will create hundreds of thousands of jobs and more than offset the impacts of Trump's tariffs. For children and families, the AFN budget report calls on Canada to keep the $47.8 billion that we negotiated last year for the long-term reform of Canada's discriminatory First Nations child welfare system on the budget table. So we're calling on Canada to keep that there. On education, to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the historic final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission later this year, I believe December is the 10th anniversary of the TRC. Our federal budget submission invites Canada to consider a once-in-a-generation investment in First Nations education, training, and languages. We are concerned about reports received last week about Canada terminating negotiation tables that were on the verge of completing important regional education funding agreements. Our kids need that, to the federal government, and they're listening. Our children need that. You can't cut education from them. Canada has exempted health, education, and social transfer payments to provincial governments from their new program review, and this should be done for First Nations children and First Nations. The same should be done for First Nations. Don't pick on our kids. In addition to other essential community health investments, our budget calls for an urgent $700 million investment to support First Nations-led mental health strategies and the distribution of more naloxone kits to our communities across the country. On capacity building and on the Building Canada Act, the AFN budget submission recommends an $800 million investment over the next 2 years to support First Nations review of national interest projects. Unfortunately, Canada proposed $40 million and their limit is insufficient and will lead to conflicts. This investment can also support the First Nations-led procurement authority that we proposed earlier this year to achieve 5% of the federal targets for actual First Nations businesses. Canada's non-enforced procurement standards are damaging to First Nations and to Canadians. Properly deployed, this new First Nation Procurement Authority will deliver significant benefits to newly emerging economies, particularly related to defense. So in closing, we want to make it clear that First Nations we stand with all Canadians in condemning Trump's illegal tariffs. First Nations have fought for Canada in difficult times. In every world war, First Nations were the first to step forward for this country. And now is one of those times again, and we are stepping forward. And the truth is that First Nations support economic growth and prosperity for all, but not at the expense of our rights or on the Crown's legal obligations to our people. Our work over the coming days and weeks will be complex and made much more intense by the many social, economic, and cultural challenges facing our First Nations people. There's much to do, but by strengthening our relations and united and having these discussions this week, we can do anything that we set our mind to have. We've always been very resilient people and we'll continue to do that. So Chimigwech, thank you so very much for being here. Cherish.
Thank you, National Chief. So maybe what I'll do is I'll turn the mic over to Regional Chief Willie Moore.
Morning. Thank you to our knowledge keeper, Leonard, for the opening prayer and guidance in a good way. To National Chief, thank you for the welcoming remarks and the comments, and welcome home. This is where it all began in Winnipeg. Look forward to the next 3 days as our relatives gather here in Center Third Island, Treaty 1. We acknowledge that we're gathered on the lands of the Treaty 1 nations. Look forward to the discussion. It was a challenging time for our region this summer with the wildfires. The initial assembly was planned in mid-July, and they had to postpone it until now. To the executive, thanks, and Naskimak, my colleagues, for having the belief for our region to host our annual General Assembly. It's going to be a very busy time in the next few days. The issues across the border, collectively the same, as we know. A challenging time, a critical time, with the Canada economy, the national interest, and so the focus on the Assembly will be, we're going to touch on those for sure, absolutely. And it's important to note, at the end of the day, it's negotiations that that the rights holders, the nations, that they're going to lead the way they see fit for them, for their communities, for their people, and the resolutions, that the chiefs in Assembly and they echo to the executive that business needs to be conducted, and looking forward to that. And so with that, I'm going to say keep it brief, but I welcome you all. I'm going to welcome everybody that's joining online. We're very excited. The 63 First Nations in the Manitoba AFN region, from the Sininu, the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Dakota, and the Dene. Very humbled and honored to host our national gathering. It hasn't been in Winnipeg since 2014, when we last hosted the Special Chiefs Assembly. So look forward, to seeing everybody from coast to coast, and then we welcome you all with open arms. And kagilagi na nas kumit now. So, tawal.
Thank you, Regional Chief Moore. Now I'd like to pass the mic over to FSIN Vice Chief Fabian Head.
Good morning. Nigana tinanas kumao, mamitawi mao, umagisagaw amigo aganuds, mina tinanas kumakite, Leonard, apipas kitina agumuta. Pema maintuag Fabian Head and Sigasun because Squagagas Gutinia Treaty 5 territory. So good morning. First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge the Creator, thank the Creator for this day that we have been gifted here as well. I'd like to acknowledge the Elder as well, and for the prayer that was rendered here this morning. I'd like to acknowledge the Executive, the AFN Chief as well, Cindy, and the Executive around the table. And I'm honored to be here to come bring greetings on this beautiful territory of Treaty 1 here, the unceded territory. You know, we have a position as well in Saskatchewan, and I want to be speaking onto that as well here this morning. Like I said, I'm honored to be here. And, you know, first, we want to let the government, remind the government, the federal government and the provincial governments that, you know, our First Nations, we've always had inherent rights. And that's a statement in itself, inherent rights. Inherent rights that the Creator bestowed upon us here as the original peoples of Turtle Island. The treaties did not grant us these rights. The treaties recognized these rights that we've always existed. We did not cede, release, or surrender our rights to the land and resources. We agreed to share the land. The treaties were meant to ensure that our continual survival, not to strip away our rights. The National Interest Legislation, Bill C-5, the National, was merely introduced, debated, and amended in a matter of weeks. There was no meaningful consultation with First Nations, despite having the potential to greatly impact the exercise of our rights. Nothing in the Acts makes First Nations input binding. This framework risks overriding our jurisdiction on our lands, waters, and resources. Let us be clear that the critical minerals and other resources driving the Canadian economy are being extracted from our treaty and traditional territories. Major project discussions must include us, because these decisions affect our people's inherent right and treaty rights by impacting our ability to exercise our rights to hunt, fish, trap, and pass on our way of life. In Saskatchewan, First Nations see little to no benefit from resource development. Meanwhile, cities, towns, and resort villages receive benefits from our resources. Canada's economy is built on resources taken from our territories, yet we continually be left out. For decades, resource agreements between industry and First Nations have helped bring some benefits, but that's not enough. There's a fundamental difference between resource agreements and revenue sharing. We are entitled to both, and one cannot replace the obligation of the other. While revenue sharing is becoming more common in Canada, it remains absent in Saskatchewan. The government of Saskatchewan still refuses to enter into any resource revenue sharing agreements, despite clear examples showing how it could work. We are the only group in Saskatchewan excluded from sharing in the wealth generated by resource development. That is not reconciliation. It is not honorable, and it must change. We are not asking for special treatment. The path forward must be built on partnership, not exclusion, on upholding treaty promises and not by bypassing them, and ensuring that the wealth from our land support the well-being of our people. So with that, I'm honored to bring those greetings on behalf of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Vice Chief Ed. So maybe what I'll do is I'll open up the floor. We'll give Jerry Daniels a couple of minutes to make some opening remarks. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Bonjour, Denoi Magadak, Ogimam Kodishnak Azgarushak Dunji, Benassi Dudim. My name is Jerry Daniels. I'm from Long Plain First Nation, Treaty 1 Territory, and I'm the Grand Chief for the Southern Chiefs Organization. I want to just start by thanking the Assembly of First Nations, our National Chief, Cindy Woodhouse, Nepinak, and also Regional Chief, and the Executive for agreeing to host the Assembly of First Nations here in Winnipeg. It's been quite some time, and I really just want to welcome all the chiefs who are coming, all of their staff, and I hope that you have a wonderful experience here in Treaty 1 territory. We have a lot of challenges here, and I'm happy that we were able to move forward with hosting the Assembly here. You're in a territory that right now is experiencing a huge housing crisis, rapidly increasing homelessness within the streets of Winnipeg, largest urban Indigenous population in Canada. The socioeconomic disparities within this region are quite significant. And we've talked about closing the gap for many years now. And so, but we continue to see the infrastructure and housing gap continue. We continue to see shortages in safe water, housing, overcrowding, and we need to create more affordable housing for our elders and our families. Health equity and police reform, safety within our First Nations, ending systemic racism in healthcare, delivering cultural safe services, and funding community-based First Nations policing. And you're starting to see that, and a lot of First Nations are taking a proactive approach. And I think when we come together nationally, we always look for best practices. That's why the National Chief is here to emphasize some of the larger things as well that we need to deal with collectively. And so it's important we support one another, especially in unity within this Assembly. The rights and self-determination, honoring our treaties, the nation-to-nation relationship, and reforming the Indian Act's second-generation cutoff. All are huge challenges for the future of our nations and will be important for our discussions to be focused and to see some action on the side of the federal government. So the relationships that were highlighted in terms of major projects, things that are being pushed with the Bill C-5 need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed in a constructive way. We need to see progress in recognizing First Nation sovereignty and the right to decline a major project if we do not see the long-term benefit for our nations. And so we stand with our nations who are not in support, but at the same time trying to see where are the long-term benefits and trying to understand and create more broader understanding about the potential benefits as well. And so we have huge concerns about the environment. And advanced First Nations-led growth through land loan guarantees. If you, those of you who are downtown, you don't have to go far. The Wayway Begakanagan project is just down the way. Our crane is in the air, and we're building housing and partnering with downtown private sector like True North. We have the True North SCO 21 or 92, which is going to be a high-rise tower right by Portage Place. And so there's a lot of landmarks that are going to be developed here for all of those who are visiting. And so we hope you take time to take in some of the great work that's being done here. And also the healing and cultural renewal. Although we do have a huge epidemic of drugs and alcohol happening within our nations, there's also a lot of great work for our survivors. And so we need to continue to see that support increase, support for our families through truth-telling, healing programs, traditional healers, and cultural renewal. And so again, thank you to the executive of the AFN, and we wish everyone well here, a safe experience and enjoyable experience here in Treaty 1 territory.
Awesome. Thank you, Grand Chief Daniel. So
Because we're in their territory, I want Grand Chief to say a few words
Okay,
about
yeah.
the people in the
Absolutely.
city, and I know you're evacuated.
Thank you, Grand Chief Sugumak, National Chief Cindy Woodhouse. Ganin nanakumisik pangina de Chikitian, where Kendana, where Pani Yangani on the Machaba Siank, where Gani Bank, Gagatu Gakana, Skunganan, Machawa Given, Gagi Machaba Siank. Nanakumak Saswana Gogomount, Siene, Gagi Vichi Watch, Gagi Vichi Gankani Nondwe. Ano inago kia ono guna naga kagi na nesetam segenwe sa guche gono ke utan kik Wega tap mago no chugma ke na kuma gyune giwicho achene. Ega kenim shek Alex McDougall doesn't have with Nakegen in Anson Newman Grand Council man don Genono. I'd just like to very quickly express my thanks to the AFN organization, National Chief Woodhouse, Regional Chief Willie, and of course the other leadership at the table here. My name is again Alex McDougall. I represent New Grand Council out of Island Lake, a remote and isolated region that still relies very much on the land for its sustenance. And the question of C5 that's been mentioned, of course, I support the sentiments and comments provided by our previous speakers, and the work that needs to be done around finding our common goals and shared interests as First Nations people in this province, in this country. The way I see it is C5 all is, a perfect example of colonialism, capitalism, imperialism, all wrapped up into one. The lack of consultation, Canada not reaching out again to our people to talk about potential opportunities is something that has been shared with me through our leadership, and the potential impacts it'll have on our identity, our language, and our culture. The land is very much a part of our lives. It's our Walmart. It's our grocery store. You've heard that many times, and yet government continues to provide less and less resources for us to look after the many gaps that the National Chief and others at the table have identified. Our education and our capital projects are all underfunded, and yet we continue to hear from the federal government that there'll be more cuts coming. And by the way, we're going to get into your territories and extract all the mineral resources that we can. I think you need to start with talking to our people and seeing how we can, first of all, get to the same level of consideration as other Manitobans and Canadians have with the federal government. It's amazing and unbelievable for me at this time that a government still ignores and neglects and marginalizes our people. And it's done through their institutions, it's done through their standards, and yet we let it happen. And I think it's about time our leadership step up and say that's enough of that. And I think that's where most of the positions are coming in, is Canada needs to talk to our communities first before we entertain any type of project in our community. We got to make sure our children are taken care of, our families are taken care of. That's our priority, and I'm hoping that in our discussions at the Assembly with AFN, I look forward to those conversations with our chiefs where we can identify common and shared interests in protecting our treaties. Thank you.
Thanks, Grand Chief. Yeah, we'll open up the floor for questions now. So, any questions from the media?
Great, we're good.
Hello, it's Alex Carver here from CTV National News. Anyone can answer this question just regarding, the infrastructure and, just the importance of having Indigenous voices heard in projects that the federal government wants to put forward. I mean, just the importance of that. If anyone can speak on that and further that comment, thanks.
Certainly, look, on infrastructure, first of all, the infrastructure gap that we had spoke about, I know it's a big number, $350 billion. There was a commitment to close that to 2030, and I think that we need to assess ourselves as a country on, the history of this country and why the gaps are huge. And we have to come up with a game plan in this country to make sure that we're closing that infrastructure gap for First Nations children on reserve, on facilities like education facilities, schools, roads, and housing. And so lot to discuss on that. When it comes to infrastructure projects themselves, I look forward to hearing from chiefs this week. There'll be a diversity of opinions because there are some chiefs that do support what's proceeding. There's other chiefs that are reluctant, and there's also many chiefs that say we don't know yet. Like we're busy on the ground. Fighting the drug crisis in many communities and trying to get health access for their people when hospitals are hundreds of miles away. And, there is that as well. So I really look forward to hearing from chiefs. It will also be virtually live streamed, and we look forward to hearing from chiefs from coast to coast to coast. There's chiefs from every area of this country, and there's going to be a diversity, just like Canadians. There's diversity amongst First Nations. We're different language groups. We are different cultures, but at the same time, we find our common our commonalities in this country on moving forward. And, at the Assembly of First Nations, of course, we take our direction from chiefs in Assembly. And, when they pass or reject resolutions, we take that, that's our marching orders for the year ahead. So we look forward to hearing from the chiefs and, getting their mandates on what they expect of the Assembly of First Nations moving ahead. And conversations are not always easy, but they're necessary. And, I think on the Building Canada Act, there's lots of unknowns. And I think First Nations, there will be the federal government here as well, talking about, different aspects of that. And we look forward to hearing from that. So as it stands right now, the Assembly of First Nations doesn't have a position one way or another. We don't have a mandate from our chiefs. We do look forward to hearing from our chiefs in Assembly. So thank you.
Next question.
Hi, Cam McIntosh, CBC National News. On that point, to the point you just made, how important is it to come out of this with a consensus or with a unified position? At the table, you sound pretty unified on your concerns. So how important is it to come out of this understanding that First Nations are not a monolith, but the government is going to be saying it is going to be pressing ahead. So how important is it to come out of this with a position or a voice?
Geez. I'm going to say this. I think as National Chief, I don't know if I want one side over another. I never want to override. I've been taught this as well since birth. You never override another nation. You never try and tell somebody else what to do. And there's nations that are diverse across this country. And I don't think it's ever I think that the AFN, we bring commonalities and we find that common path forward together. And that's what we'll bring together at the AFN here this week. But there is First Nations out there that are, it's up to them to say yes or no to a particular project. And we don't know what those are yet. What are those projects? I mean, we keep hearing that there's a big list out there of different potential national major projects. We don't know what those are. And frankly, it's for First Nations, whether they're in the Yukon or British Columbia or Ontario or Nova Scotia, wherever they're located in all those different traditional areas, that those First Nations be given that respect, and that we make sure. I think there's something common though amongst First Nations for sure, and that is free, prior, and informed consent, to make sure that those First Nations from coast to coast to coast, wherever projects are located, that their rights are not trampled on, that you're not talking to those people one way or another, whether they agree with you or not. I know that conversations are difficult at times on many issues, but making sure that the FPIC, free, prior, and informed consent for First Nations people, is respected. So thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, Brittany Hobson with the Canadian Press. Kind of to one of your last points there, Prime Minister Mark Carney has hinted at what some projects may be, and that there may be an announcement coming in the next couple of weeks on what those will look like. I'm wondering if you folks have heard or heard from other chiefs about whether conversations have already started about different projects in different territories and what those conversations have looked like so far?
Certainly. Look, I think First Nations have been really good partners in this country for a long, long time. And as we hear from the chiefs, a lot of the benefits of this country, First Nations are left to the sidelines, and poverty is not an issue. Poverty is not anymore. We can't accept poverty anymore. At the same time, where's the balance with the environment? I know in 2015, like the COP, for instance, everybody was there. The whole world was talking about the environment. We also have to have a balance of that. Where's the environment in all of this, in that discussion? And so I look forward to our leaders, their discussion on the environment, as well as, I think that First Nations have been, some have, been part of we've all been part of the economy for a long time. But the way that things trickle down it's a discussion that needs to be had even with provinces. Everybody taking from the lands of First Nations. All of Canada is traditional First Nation territory. And when all of the resources are extracted from that and First Nations are left out of that process, I think First Nations are growing tired of that. And what's the environmental impact of that, but also what's the, if any, economic benefits to that, and are First Nations a part of that? Including the banking system we're going to talk about this week, how First Nations, a lot of Canadians don't know that if I wanted to build a McDonald's on a First Nation community, that you have to go to the Minister of Indian Affairs and ask for a ministerial loan guarantee. Can you imagine a Canadian having to go and ask, for a loan from Ottawa? And these are the things that are really tough to discuss, and the history of this country, it hasn't been kind to First Nations people, even in the banking system. So I look forward to, that's one small aspect of it, of course, technical aspect of it, but we do look forward to having that banking discussion this week on something so practical that Canadians take for granted, but First Nations are often left out of. Thank you.
All right, next question.
Hi, good morning, Chiefs. Thank you. This is Sav Jones from APTN National News. This summer has been really tough with wildfires, especially in Manitoba. I know Grand Chief Alex McDougall there from Anchenanu Okamawan, as well as York Factory First Nation, spoke about the need for all-weather roads within northern Manitoba. Premier Wab Kinew mentioned that it would cost $5 billion to have all-weather roads throughout all of northern Manitoba to remote communities, alluding that resource extraction projects would be the way to get that money. And I'm wondering if I could receive a comment on that.
I'm going to ask the Grand Chief, please, to comment on that. This is his lived reality on roads. So.
Thank you for that question. The remoteness and the impacts of climate change have certainly been something that we've seen every year. So it adds costs aside from logistical issues, bringing our supplies into our communities. So an all-weather road system coming into our remote areas would, I think, be a benefit for our members, particularly with the cost of living, and of course, Canada continuing to take away financial support to our communities. So it's getting to a point where it's critical to have that type of critical infrastructure coming into these remote and isolated areas. Thank you.
Chief Fabian, if you can, that's also your lived reality in Saskatchewan. So the roads are a big issue for First Nations. Go ahead.
Yeah, anytime that there's that devastation, as the wildfires that we've seen in northern Saskatchewan, when roads are compromised, obviously the health and safety of our people are at risk, and that's some of the areas that the federal and provincial governments need to improve on, is the resources, to deploy the resources as soon as possible and not wait till much of the nations, much of the traditional territories are already burnt. The let it burn policy does not work for our people. We have lives, we have our lands, we have our fishing lands, our waters to protect, and we can't wait for last minute help from the provincial and federal government. So, thank you.
Just to add to that, you know, the figure, what it was 500 million, no, 5 billion, and the amount of infrastructure budget is 540 million. The comments were made by the Premier and his government, you know, do you want roads? Well, we need access to the critical minerals. But they have been having access to the critical minerals all this time. You know, it's just that with the tariff situation, all of a sudden it comes of high, for national interest. A few months back, you know, the province had hosted the European Union. The ambassadors, you know, high-profile government people came to this province to meet, you know, with the Manitoba government, saying, you have the minerals, we have the financial capital to buy it off you. No invitation to any First Nations. No knowledge whatsoever. It just happened to be, you know, you're at the venue that the gathering was happening. And it was quite surprising. And so, you know, the comments, you know, of course, we expressed, you know, our disappointment, you know, of the actual gathering happening, and we did approach the European Union Vice President, I believe. You know, we shared some words with her. You know, if you're coming here to, you know, to explore, you know, to express her interest in acquiring, you know, the minerals and the resources that are in our territories, you should speak to the rights holders first, gain their trust. You know, that's where it starts, not the government. So, just wanted to elaborate on that. So,
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief Moore. Looks like we have one more question. It'll be the last question, and the National Chief has to get to your next event. So I'll let you.
Bonjour, Alain. Stephen Richard from CBC Indigenous. I heard it mentioned a little earlier. I was hoping to get a little more follow-up on overrepresentation in the justice system for First Nations people. I heard it mentioned, but I didn't hear an action plan beyond that. If there was somebody who could just give me a quote or a speech on overrepresentation.
Quebec Regional Chief. Thank you. Look, on the justice, we've had a report just recently again from Corey Wilson, and I want to commend her for that, for their strategy. And there is a lot to talk about overrepresentation, as well as, you know, I think a year ago we had mothers who also lost children from coast to coast First Nations children in the justice system, and sons and daughters. And so we have a lot to talk about on the justice strategy. There's lots of recommendations. There's reports from way back when, such as the Aboriginal Justice Strategy, the AJI report that was done right here in Manitoba. And we need to relook at a lot of these, and what things did we fulfill and what did we not fulfill. And so lots to do on justice, and if I can maybe ask Cherish to follow up with a written response on that, because there's too much to, you know, there's probably 20 pages of recommendations into one, and if we can get that to you, that would be helpful for you to read from Corey Wilson and of course Regional Chief TG and the Regional Chief from Quebec that were very influential on making sure that that work moved forward. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the question. I just can quickly add that, as we all know, there's a overrepresentation of First Nation in the justice system, and I think for years now we've been working on action to propose some solutions, and one of them is to have our own justice system. Just want to give a quick example. In our region in Quebec, we're trying to work with governments to have our own justice system, and for that needs to be happening, I think government needs to have that political will to implement those kind of solution. I think in First Nation we've been working this way for many years now. I think we do have solution to propose, and governments needs to be implementing legislative reconciliation. I think this is a key point for the future of our nations. So I just want to add this comment to to the answer. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Regional Chief Paul. Is that your last question? All right, so I just want to thank everybody for their time today and coming to the press conference, and our leadership will be available for one-on-ones if you want to have a couple of one-on-ones. So thank you.
I know.